Morning, guys. Dr. Ken Nordberg again. Another fireside hunting seminar. Got a good one for you. We'll be talking about a big buck my son Ken took a few years ago, and it's only an 8-footer, but wow, it's really an impressive buck. Wait till you see it. And there's some really good things to learn about why he got that buck this year. First, I want to mention a couple of things. Right now, I'm writing magazine articles. I've been writing magazine articles about whitetails and whitetail hunting for 40 years now. And I've got 3 of them going right now, and they're for September. And as you can imagine, when you write September articles, we're talking about, well, like for example, bear hunting starts on September 1st. Our bow hunting here in Minnesota starts on September 19th. And, I started with an article mentioning something like it's okay now to become enthused about deer hunting, even though someone in your house might groan a little bit when they're told about it. But so my mindset is on talking about what's happening in September. And one of the things that I'm talking about in September is scouting. And I know there's a lot of guys that don't scout. Nowadays, sporting goods stores are loaded with all kinds of buck lures. There's, doe and estrus type, and there's calls, grunt calls and doe calls and fawn calls, and there's rattling antlers, and there's all kinds of foods. You can buy sacks of corn, in states where it's legal, and for hunting, and seeds for food plots, and it's all these things that are supposed to attract big bucks to stand sites. So a lot of guys figure, I don't need to scout. I can put my stand anywhere I want, or I can use the one I used last year just fine, and I can attract bucks using these lures. And I can even be more sure about whether I'm going to take a buck there by buying a trail cam. You put it up there and you get a picture, and a big buck picture, and it says, oh boy, that's where I'm going to hunt. And they figure all you need is one or more of those lures and a portable tree stand and a trail cam, and you're in business to take a big buck, right? Huh? So think about that a little bit. You probably, if this is what you do, this is what you're doing today, you're probably suffering through, last year you probably suffered through another fruitless season. You might have had a chance at a yearling, or buck, or fawn, maybe a 2.5-year-old buck, or doe, if that's what you want to take, that's fine. Especially where there's a lot of deer, got to keep the numbers down. That's our job, But if a big buck was what you really wanted, you don't probably think of it as a great hunting season last year, or the year before, or the year before that, and so forth. And there's really a big reason for that, is because for 35 years, millions of American deer hunters have been using those buck lures. They keep changing, but they're still basically the same buck lures, and tree stands, and more recently, trail cams. But tree stands and buck lures. And and during those 35 years, we've been weeding out all the young and old deer that are vulnerable to hunting, using those kind of things when hunting. And the ones that survive have been becoming more and more elusive to stand hunters and other hunters for that matter. And they've gotten to the point where a lot of us are convinced that that those kind of deer, the older bucks, are getting to be rare, and something should be done to improve their numbers. Well, I can assure you, they aren't rare. They're as numerous as they've always been, but they're more elusive. And so it takes a lot more to be able to take older bucks now. In fact, there are 5 areas of expertise that you need today compared to hunting, say, 40 years ago, to take a big buck or to become regularly successful at it. You know, my 3 sons and I have been regularly successful at it for 30 years, using 6 new hunting methods, stand hunting methods, all fair chase, using no lures whatsoever. But we've taken 105 in 30 years. Now, wouldn't you like to have that kind of hunting success in the future? Well, one of the things you do when you go scouting, the first thing we do, you got to know what you're looking for. And what we're looking for is what we call mature buck effective stand sites. Now, there aren't many deer hunters in the world who know anything about mature buck effective stand sites. Well, there are 8 characteristics of such stand sites in the woods. And if you knew all these characteristics, every buck effective stand site doesn't have all 8 of these things. There's differences, different situations, but they've got 3 or more, and some always. Like number 1 in our book, and you would have a hard time dealing with this when you think about it. Number 1 in our book is this stand site has never been used before. They are never used before stand sites are clearly the best places to take older bucks, as long as some of these other characteristics are there, such as very fresh tracks and or droppings, or maybe a very freshly renewed ground scrape, depending on the time of the year. Those got to be there within easy shooting range, and you got to be downwind or crosswind of those. Those are 2 of the 8. Now, do you know all 8? I've talked about these in the past, but do you remember all 8 of the characteristics that will enable you to take older bucks this year? Well, I don't have time to go out through those 8. So what I'm getting around to is you need my book, I go through these characteristics in great detail in this book. And before long, it's going to be time to scout. Maybe you think you can get by with buck lures and a trail cam, but in time you're going to finally be convinced this isn't working. But eventually you're going to want to be able to walk in the woods, scout, and come to a place and say, boy, this is a spot where I'm going to take a big buck. And quite often, when you know this, you're going to actually take a big buck at spots like that. You don't always get them there. If you did, us Nordbergs would go up there, and by noon the first day it'd be time to go home. We all got a buck. It isn't that easy. You still got to work hard at it. But those 8 things are things you need to know, and you'll find them all in there, and it'll really make a difference in your hunting. So don't wait till the last minute to get the book. You want this before you even start scouting, so you can learn what you're looking for. So be sure to do that. Don't wait around. Get your book. Same with bear hunting. If you don't have this book, I guarantee, absolutely guarantee, you're going to make a ton of mistakes before you even start. That'll make it impossible for you to take a trophy class bear that weighs, say, 300 pounds or more. You just aren't going to do it. There's so much you got to know before you even begin to make that happen. And there again, bear hunting isn't that far away. And here in Minnesota starts September 1st, and you got to get out there and scout and prepare a bait stand site, maybe a couple of them. So there's a lot to do between now and then. So So don't let this slip by this year. If you're going bear hunting, you want this book. This book was first published, this is the 5th edition, first published in 1988. And it's been the Bear Hunter's Bible in America ever since, and it changed the way bears are hunting all over North America. And it's still changing because bears are like deer are getting more difficult. The bigger ones, the older ones, are getting to be more difficult to hunt no matter how you do it. So do that, okay? Well, now let's get back to this big 8-pointer. This is this map, a rough map of one area in which we hunt. It's probably about, a little more than a quarter-mile square. Well, maybe a little more than a quarter-mile from east to west and about a quarter-mile from top to bottom. And you're looking at, thinking topographically, you look at over here is a great big tall hill. There's another hill there, not so, more gradual, but this one's got steep sides, obviously. And here's one over there. There's a small little one here. This is a clear cut here, and it was cut as one of the last clear cuts, the last area to be logged in our hunting area, and it's getting bigger now. There's a lot of second growth poplar in there, and a lot of it is 6 to 8 feet tall now, and you can have a lot of deer out in there and not see them. They're well hidden. But as usual in clear cuts where we hunt, you'll eventually, not everywhere, but in large areas usually, there will be areas where there are a lot of the kind of browse growing that whitetails like to eat beginning in early November, and they eat browse all winter. Woody stems of shrubs and small trees. And one of their real favorites up in our country, in northern Minnesota, is a plant called the red osier. You hear me saying that all the time. It's like the red bark dogwood you buy at the nursery to put in your yard, So, red bark on them. And, whitetails love those. They eat them. In fact, I have whitetails living about 6 blocks from where I am in a park. And they visit my house every now and then to eat the red osiers in my yard. In fact, they ate one to the ground and it died finally. And more recently, they've been eating rosebuds off my prized rose bushes. Well, anyway, this area gets full of them here. Now, while we were scouting in October, mid-October, 2 weeks before hunting, we get all our scouting and whatever preparations we want to do in the woods done at least 2 weeks before the deer season begins. Because when they're scouting, we're going to be putting trail scent all over the area. We just go every which way. We don't want to miss anything. So we do a lot of traveling on foot throughout our hunting area when we're scouting early. And trail scent all over the place. Well, that trail scent normally fades within 4 days. And so, but then we don't come back. We do put up trail cams here and there. Usually, like my son Dave and then John now, when they put up a trail cam, they usually plan it. They go up there early, like maybe a week or two before we plan to scout and do all our trail preparation. So that when we come up to scout, then they can take the camera and take out the card and put a new one and take the card home and see what they got on their computers. So, but at any rate, we do use them. But we've learned too that not to count too heavily on trail cams for telling where to take a big buck. And I mentioned before, I remember one year Dave he photographed 7 different bucks of various sizes on one trail. And he was so excited about that, and he was so careful about putting up 2 tree stands to hunt on that trail. And he didn't see a buck during the hunting season. And we took 4 of those bucks, half to a whole entire mile away from where they were photographed during our November hunting season when does were in estrus and does in heat. So we've learned, boy, you just can't depend on that, but there are things you can depend on, like those 8 characteristics of a mature buck effective stand sight I was talking about. Well, anyway, so we get out there, and that's what we're looking for, those 8 things. And like I said before, all mature buck effective stand sites don't have all 8. In fact, most of them don't. They might eventually have it over the course of a hunting season, but not. They usually have maybe 4, 5 of those characteristics. So we know what we're looking for. So my son Ken, who liked to hunt in this area, spends a lot of time, him and his son, scouting this area here. And there's a little stream running through it. It goes east to west here. Actually, it's a little kind of at an angle. It's kind of north is this direction, but this is pretty much the way it runs from east to west or west to east. Well, anyway, and there are some high hills in this country. And some years ago, when Ken was young, you know, like he takes his son up there, and back when I used to take him when he was young, I often took him down into this area here. We had a high hill here. Ken named it Antler Mountain. And he's taken 3 pretty good bucks on Antler Mountain years ago. And it was a high hill, and it was covered with pines, white pines mostly. There's some jack pines in there, but a lot of pines and steep hillside here. And there was a spot I found before that where a buck liked to bed, right there where that red spot is on the side of that mountain. You know, bucks like, a lot of bucks, not all of them, but a lot of bucks like to bed on tall hills, mountainsides even. Tall hills, not right at the top, but usually a little bit below. That way they aren't skylighted when they're up there moving around. They're down a little bit. And in wolf country, our deer think about things like that. They're smarter about not being skylighted than humans are. But anyway, he liked to bed there, and that thing was used year after year. You go up there while they're scouting, and there are these flattened beds amongst these big pines on the side of the hill there. So the first time I brought him up there, I was hunting down in a tree stand close to the stream here, watching wolves going by, and he was up here fairly close to where that buck had been bedding. I had him sitting right there, right in front of a big pine tree. You could lean back there, but the main thing is that there was a really good deer trail going around the base of that big high hill, and he'd keep an eye on that. Well, I remember that morning when I took him there. I took him to his spot here. We went right up on the hill, and I put him right there on that. Well, we didn't go for it. We came from this direction. We went up there, and then I went back and went around to go there because I didn't want to be putting fresh trail sand all over this area here. Well, I went to my stand site down here close to the stream, and he was there. And it was a cold morning. Boy, it was cold that morning. But I remember climbing up to my stand, and then I had this plastic lantern, flashlight, beam on it that big around, big and everything with a 6-volt battery in it, and I had that, and I went up there and put it on the platform, and then I got up there and turned around, tied myself to the tree, and I bumped that lantern with my foot, and it fell to the ground. So I made a noise when I did that, and I was being really quiet this whole time. So I untie myself and go back down there and get it. And I got up there again, and I put it back under my seat so I wouldn't bump it. And then got my gun up there and got it on my lap, and I brought it up on the string, got it on my lap, and I had this pack sack that I was wearing then. It was different, and that was before we started using stools with a sack attached to it, a pack sack. And I was going to put it on this branch here, and here comes a buck, and he walked right up to my tree, and I had this pack sack, and I said, well, I couldn't tie it to the tree. I just kind of put it down real quiet, real slowly. And then I was going for my gun laying across my lap, and about then it looked up. And it looked at me, and it was an 8-pointer. he looked up at me and and then I didn't dare move. You know, I was sitting there just staring at me and staring at me. And finally he flicked his tail and walked right under my stand and went up behind me, and I was trying to get around, turn around to get a shot at it. It was big enough to take, you know. So, but by the time I got it turned around and got my gun up there, it was gone. So I was sitting there, and what it did is went this way. And about 15 minutes later, it was on this trail, right there, and bang, Ken got it, dropped in his tracks. And I figured that's what would happen, you know, and I wasn't that far away, so I climbed down, went up there, and sure enough, there he was, looking at the buck, and he was shivering. He was cold. Well, before we field dressed this buck, I'll make a fire. I built a bonfire up there so he could get warm, you know, by this trail here down below here, under all these big pines. So nice big roaring bonfire, get him warmed up. And then we field dressed it and then dragged it out in this direction and back to this old logging trail. Well, it wasn't a logging trail then, it was just a deer trail. It went back toward camp. The long drag to take the buck. But that was his first buck from this country when we hunted there. Well, since then he's taken some others there, and a couple of them are on the wall. So anyway, he got this one. Well, you know, this was many years later, and many bucks later. He had taken quite a few bucks over the years, including a really nice big one for the wall that on this trail down here in these pines while he was sitting there on the side of that Antler Mountain. And really a nice one, beautiful buck. Well, anyway, he was scouting this area with his son, and this is a deer trail going along the edge of the stream here, and they got down in this area here, and right here was an obvious trail across the stream. The stream is kind of shallow there, rocky, and well-worn trail on both sides of the stream. You know, you can see, boy, the deer have been really using this. And for good reason. This area had been just cut, clear cut the year before. And this area here was now full of those red osiers or red bark dogwoods over here. And there was a well-used deer trail going along. You could see it. You could stand over here and see this really well-traveled deer trail over on this side. And apparently, you know, and which happens, you know, clear cuts do that. They'll attract deer from other areas for a while. They were coming down here and crossing the stream and to go over here to feed. And that looked good. And so I went down there, and it was some little mud in the area there, and looking at tracks, and there were some 4-inch tracks in there. Now, you know, you've heard me mention 4-inch tracks before. Us Nordbergs, we get kind of excited. Oh, 4-inch tracks. He puts a smile in front. That's a big buck. That's as big as they get. Bucks with that, you know, little deer like fawns, they have little tracks, and middle-sized deer like mature does. They weigh about, in our country, 140 pounds, 130, 140 pounds. They have 3-inch long hoof fronts. You know, not counting those little indentation caused by their dew claws behind the track, but 3-inch. Well, these were 4-inch tracks, and you know, they just so much bigger than anything else in that mud there by the stream. And he was looking around and said, boy, you know, I think I got a hunt here. And then he notices this really tall, steep hill over here. And when he sees that, he's thinking of that one. He's learned, gee, bucks like big, tall hills like that. Not all of them, like I say, but in wolf country, I think that's kind of thing they like, where they can watch trails from up high, you know, any major deer trails from up high. They can see better down there. If they're down low, like down here or somewhere, they wouldn't probably see anything on that trail, but way up high up there, it's like being in a real tall deer stand. They can see things going on that trail. And this being a favorite trail of wolves in the wintertime, wolf packs in the wintertime, I guess that would be an especially good place to bed during the day. So he was saying, oh, there's got to be a big buck bedding on that hill. And there's just got to be. Look up there, real tall and real steep. And he said, so he's thinking, this is going to be a dandy spot to hunt right here. Watch this area where they're crossing the stream. And he's looking around and he said, oh, there's a nice big pine tree, just full and lush with branches, you know. And so he said, I'm going to put a tree stand in that tree. And so he built a tree stand with a ladder to get up there, so he could get up there more silently than on screwing steps in. Get up there, make the ladder out of dead timber out there. But anyway, only 9 feet up, that's all he had to be, and there was no way a deer was going to see his silhouette in that tree. I mean, he is just, and a really good background of pines behind that, so they can look up there, and no skylighting whatsoever. And branches coming around in front of him, they're almost hugging him there. And he sits back there and leaning against that tree trunk, and he said, that's going to be a perfect spot. And he's kind of up a little bit. This hill is kind of a hillside on both sides here. And so he's up a little bit higher. I said, oh, this is going to be perfect when I got a north, northwest, or west wind. That's what you got to have. Because I'm going to take this trail, deer trail, to get here. And then I'm going to climb in this stand. And his son, we picked out a spot for him further on, and they put up one of these ladder stands, you know, with the ladder attached, the metal ladder. And they put that up down here in this area. Good spot. Crossed the trail to get there, but Ken was sitting there. Nothing was going to, you know, that trail scent is only there and on here. And until a deer hits that trail scent there, they're probably going to realize there's been a human there. You got to get fairly close to the trail scent, but when they hit that, they're going to sniff it. I've taken deer that while they were in the process of doing that, bucks. So anyway, that part was all right. Now then, so I remember opening morning that year. You know, always set up camp 3 days early and get to bed early the night before, usually by 8 o'clock, because we're going to get up at 4. And so it's all quiet, and finally the alarm goes off, and then as usual everybody stays in bed till I get up, and I get a fire going in our barrel wood stove, and then get the coffee water on, and then I go out to the latrine, and then on the way back I shine my flashlight up there at the stovepipe at the top, you know. We see where the smoke's going, and the smoke, and I just saw then the wind that morning was coming, a light breeze, coming from the southeast. And when I went in and everybody asked, well, what direction the wind, they always want to know, and that's always number one, and you know, every morning for us Nordbergs, or any time of the day, number one is wind direction, always. We're very, very careful about that, because we've long known there's nothing you buy in the store that can absolutely subdue all human odors. They help. I always tell people, use them, because the less you smell, the less you stink, the less likely it is that your airborne odors are going to seriously alarm deer. But if you're really smelling, you know, you smell like pizza or a hamburger with onions on it, or sausage or hotcakes in the morning, that's not good. Some of those deer, you're going to be walking out there in the dark, you're standing, and anything that's downwind of you, fairly short, some of them might think, oh geez, they'll be snorting and you can hear them bounding, and you don't want that to happen. You want to be as scent-free as you can, even though it's not going to be perfect. So anyway, but we don't want deer to know where we are. When we sit down at a stand site, we don't want anything there that is going to warn deer beforehand that there's a human there. It's got to be a brand new place. They've never found a hunter there before. I have no reason to believe that there's any danger in that area because there's never been any hunter around there before. And we're thinking that even when we're, scouting, oh, we find a spot and say, oh, geez, this looks good. Well, when we find one, we do what we use natural cover, and we save as much as of it we can. In fact, all of it if possible, because the less change there is, the more likely it is that a buck is going to notice that, hey, there's something different here. And he'll stop and inspect the area. Gee, why is that? Why are those branches laying over there? Why are those big white tips on branches sticking up over here where somebody's been sawing, Then they get closer, and if there's trails saying all the way around, even 2 weeks before the hunting season, they get to that spot, and it stinks with human trails. They've been walking all over the place and going over here and all this kind of thing. This is a dangerous place. Humans spend a lot of time here. They're really interested in this area. Now, no humans might show up in that area again for two weeks, which is the case where we hunt. Nobody will be there until we start hunting there 2 weeks later. But that buck has been tipped off well before we start hunting there. And though they may not find us there after that, they're going to be especially alert to sight, sound, and sense each time they approach it. And they're masters at finding and identifying and avoiding hunters, including tree stand hunters. They're the best deer in the woods at that. And you don't want them to be tipped off they're going to be there. So even when we're scouting, boy, when we find a spot we're going to use, get what you have to done quick. Stay away from the area where you expect to see the buck. You don't want them to be worried about that spot where this is where I want to see them, where these trails cross or something, or where the trail goes across that creek. You don't want any trail scent there. So get it done and get out of there, and don't come back again. You might put a trail can up there, but don't mess with it until you hunt there. After you spot, and when you go there to hunt, and then when you leave at 11 in the morning, well, then get your card out and put a new one and take it back to camp with you. But don't mess around there anymore until the hunting season begins. We're that careful. So opening morning, when Ken was told we got a southeast wind, meaning the wind would be blowing from down here up this way, right along there, coming up this valley here where the creek was, and kind of stick to the valley, and going up that hill where he thought the buck would be or something, but breeding was going on then too, and so there's a lot of things that could be going on here, and maybe the buck was with a doe and estrus a mile away that morning, but he didn't know those things. But this was such a good setup, he couldn't wait to use it, so he was really disappointed that morning. But we don't take chances. We never say, well, I'm going there anyway, maybe we'll get lucky. No way. So he knew better. He said, so I'm going to wait. I'll wait until the wind is right. And he did. And the very next day, the wind was from the northwest. Perfect. So, he was happy. Boy, he couldn't wait. So away he went. And the first time they used the trail, the first time they used this trail to get there, and they used this deer trail where they picked up all the dead branches, threw them off, when scouting made that trail as silent underfoot as they can, So they're looking real quiet and moving like we do when we go into tree stands, walking non-stop. You go right straight, especially when you're within 200 yards. Non-stop, right to the stand site, and get up there and get settled right away quickly, and you're all set. You don't stop along the way. Non-stop at a moderate pace, bending your knees when you're walking so you pick up your feet. You're not dragging your feet on the ground or in the snow or whatever. You pick them up with each step, but just keep marching right along, your head pointed straight ahead, And that's important. Wolves taught us that. Wolves can walk by deer in the woods that same way, non-stop, keep going along a trail, like this trail along the stream here, and there can be deer feeding here, and they'll stop and they'll see the wolves go by, and as long as the wolves are moving in that way, steady, non-stop, looking straight ahead, they don't worry about them. Wolves live with deer year-round. They are only frightened by them when they see the wolves are actually hunting. They're sneaking, stalking, stopping. When they start doing that kind of thing, oh, we better get out of here. Especially if it appears that, if a deer thinks I'm the prey they're after, I'm getting out of here. So wolves like to fool deer into thinking they're not hunting. They'll just keep walking like that, and they'll pick up their trail or pick up their scent as they're going by, and they can smell that scent. And from that alone, they know what deer it is. They know if it's a big buck or a little fawn, or if the deer is sick and got arthritis pretty bad now and he can't run as fast, he's wounded, bleeding, whatever. They can tell that, and when they decide, hey, well, let's give this one a try today, they'll keep going until they're out of sight and then sneak back. And one of those wolves will try to drive that deer that they want to get, especially if it's a mature whitetail, which can outrun, healthy mature whitetails can outrun wolves. They're faster, and they can leap over things that wolves can't. And so those kind of things that slow the wolf down that's pursuing them. So they want to catch them by surprise real quick and drive them toward the rest of the wolves waiting downwind and get them that way, close in, and deer doesn't have a chance then. That's the way, one of the ways our wolf packs get deer. So anyway, when the wolves are doing it, when we started doing what the wolves do, walking steady, head pointed straight ahead, all the way to the tree stand, we weren't hearing snorting and bounding deer around us. All the way to the stand, silent. And where you hunt, there's anywhere from 20 or 15 to 30 deer on a square mile. That's a lot of deer out there on a square mile. If all the trees suddenly disappear, there'd be a big herd out there standing in this square mile. And isn't it amazing how you can walk there all day and never see a deer? Well, when the deer hear you coming or see you coming, then they'll stop and freeze and watch you go by. And if you aren't hunting, they aren't going to worry about you. They treat humans like they do wolves. We're dangerous. As long as we aren't, but if we aren't hunting, if we aren't acting, we're sneaking and zigzagging, going through, stopping often, looking ahead, listening. If we're not doing that, if we're just walking steady with the head pushed up, they don't worry about us. They'll watch us go by, we're out of sight and hearing, and they'll just continue doing what they were doing before you came along. So anyway, Ken went out there that morning, and it was perfect wind direction, walking like we were talking, him and his son just kept going. And he got up in his tree quietly and sat down, and he was all set to go. At 8:45, I don't know why that buck was still up there. 8:45, this buck came walking down the hill, down to the stream. I don't know why it was still up there. We would expect that much earlier to be feeding somewhere and be with a doe and heat, but maybe there was no does and heat in this side, maybe on that side of the stream where he lived. But anyway, he came down this hill to the stream, 8:45. And Ken saw that thing coming down, and it was just like the kind of deer he was dreaming would come down. It was a big buck, really a big one. And it got down to the water and dipped its head to drink. And as Ken took his shot then, high chest shot, and dropped it in his tracks. And that was it. Go down there a little later, when the sun comes, they dragged it up onto the bank here, up there to get it out of the water. And then they took off for camp. They couldn't wait for me to come there and photograph him and the deer and see this deer because it was really special. And you'll see it too. Get a good look at this baby. You look at that nose on it. It's got a nose like a heifer. I shot an 8-pointer quite a few years ago that had a nose like that. And they don't all have big noses like that, but this one did. It's really unusually large. Big rack. I thought, oh, that's going to be a Popin young buck for sure, but it was short of that. It didn't quite make it. You know, they got to be 170 or more, and it wasn't quite that big. But it's really a beauty, and it always, whenever you look at the wall, you always pause and say, oh, that's a nice buck. And you'll see. But here's the thing, you know, like I was saying last time and time before, to be regularly successful taking big bucks, you got to put 4 things together. You know, a great knowledge of the area hunt, and there's certainly a lot of knowledge there. A lot of the knowledge was gained when he was younger and did some serious hunting and taking some really nice bucks, including one big one for the wall at Antler Mountain. So, you know, he just sensed right away when he saw that hill, I got to hunt here. And then a great knowledge of deer signs, another thing you got to have. And when he saw those 4-inch tracks, I mean, nobody had to tell him, this is a big buck, you know. And this was a place that kind of like a funnel, you know, the stream is kind of a rushing stream, a lot of white water in it. Kind of quiet here, and shallow and rocky, but gravelly, and a nice place for the deer to cross, and they've been crossing a lot of cover, a lot of big pine trees all the way around there, and so that was kind of a funnel for movements from this back and forth here between this feeding area and that side of the stream. So, you know, it was like you're as likely to see him over here or over here. This would be where you would see that buck if he was going to come down across stream like he'd been doing before, according to the tracks he found there. So that he knew by looking at those tracks and where they are and all that kind. This is a great place to hunt, and this is a big buck. He knew that. So that takes care of 2 things you have to have in order to be regular at taking older bucks. Well, another thing was you have to have a good knowledge of the actual habits and behavior of older bucks while breeding is in progress. You know, in November when we hunt, that's really important. And actually, there's breeding-related influences on where bucks are any time between the 1st September when they shed velvet until a week after the new year begins, and well into January of the new year. Something related with hunting is affecting where bucks are, you know. And but at any rate, you know, knowing this, you know, and this buck here was here. Ken was thinking there's probably doe and estrus here. Maybe doe and estrus comes over here and feeds here. And so he said, that's got to be happening. Otherwise this buck could probably be somewhere else. But he's here now. Knowing habits and behavior of bucks, and he was thinking, well, this would be a great place for the buck to bed over on this side. And you'd see plenty of doe tracks coming over on this side, and fawn tracks as well coming over to feed here. And if that doe was in estrus that's feeding there early in the morning, this buck would be anxious to get over there, or maybe check on that doe and see if she's in heat, because there's all kinds of reasons. But bucks are always with does from one time or another during the day, and when does are in heat, all day with that doe, 24 to 26 hours they'll be with that doe. But anyway, does are always involved, does in heat, or maybe even not in heat, but they're always involved with where bucks are through the day. So there was plenty of reason to believe that if a doe was involved, this thing was probably feeding over here when he got to his stand up here, see? And so and the wind was blowing this direction, so it wouldn't go over to this area where the doe would be feeding and fawn, that kind of thing. So, that well, this really looks good. On the second morning, everything seemed just perfect, you know. It's all quiet. No, he didn't alarm any deer that he knew of, and the doe was probably there. Then the fourth thing you have to have expertise to be regularly successful is how to identify mature buck effective stand sites. You know, we started out talking about that. He was finding all kinds of reasons. You know, first of all, you know, we're talking about, you know, the buck probably beds here. Deer on this side were coming over here to feed. That looked really, it definitely had fresh tracks there on opening morning. When I got in the tree, you could see the fresh tracks of deer, in the mud, going up back and forth across the stream. There's deer here in the area. You know, great cover where he was sitting, that's part of mature buck effect stand site, being really well hidden where you're sitting, you know, so the deer can't see your silhouette or any movements you might make, slow movements, not quick ones, but slow movements, well hidden in that tree. And he was downwind. We're expected to see the buck. He was looking for him to show up over here on this side and maybe be coming down that big hill. And he dreamt about it. He said, it was just like I dreamt. I dreamt about getting and it came marching down there and down to the water, and it was probably getting ready to come over here. But, you know, everything was there. So he had a mature buck effective stand site. He could get there without the buck knowing it. All kinds of things, because the wind was right now and all that sort of thing. So he got it. So it wasn't luck. And so often, during year after year, this sort of thing happens. One or all of us even, not usually all of us, but most of us, will go home after scouting and say, I found a perfect spot, and I just know I'm going to get a buck there, and they're so excited, can't wait for the season to begin. And you know, that's a good thing. I mean, that's what scouting can do for you. When you're certain you have a good chance to take a big buck, man, are you careful and thorough in your preparations for hunting, and careful in doing the right things when you're hunting, like the way you walk in the woods, you know, to get a stand site. All those things. You just are so careful to do everything just perfectly and take no chances. You know what you're doing, because you know, we've been doing it for 30 years, and so often, I mean, it's happened to all of us many times now, that because we did it, it worked. Because we knew all these things, it worked. Because we knew our country real well, it worked. There's so many hunters that just don't do that. And just imagine now, if you're saying, well, I don't need to go out there and scout, I just need to put a stand anywhere I want, and I can use these lures and maybe make a food plot, you know, plant some turnips or some clover out there in the woods, patch in the woods. That's all I need to do. And you could put a trail cam out there in the woods, and gee, here's a picture of a big buck on your food plot, and oh boy, you're all excited now. But just, there's one thing about that, you know. Most of the time, almost always, when you're hunting older bucks, during the hunting season, almost always, you only get one chance at any one stand site to take that buck. If you're right, you know, you might not be right, and he just never shows up in that area, but most times it's just one chance. And sad to say, most of the time when that chance occurs, you won't know it. But what happened there, the buck is close, pretty close. And he's either spotted you in your tree stand. So many guys, they just don't pay any attention to trying to be really hidden when they're up in a tree. That's a sad thing. If you're going to hunt bucks, you can't get away with sitting on what looks like a telephone pole, and without any cover around you when you're hunting big bucks. He might be quite a ways away and sees you. Oh, there's a hunter in that tree there, on that tree trunk. And if it's an older buck, he didn't get to be old by being stupid. He's a smart deer, and once he's got you pegged at that spot, he's not going to come back there during daylight hours, if at all. He's going to stay away from there. He's going to take detours to go around you. He might not. He probably won't leave the area because you're sitting in a tree, and mature, experienced whitetails and bucks especially know you're nothing to worry about when you're in a tree, as long as they keep a safe distance away. They can live normal lives everywhere else in their home range because of that. So once he's got you, that's the end of it as far as that stand site is concerned. And you can come back there year after year. Next year you come and you're sitting there opening morning and you get he's back. Well, nothing to this, just stay away from there, out of sight of that place for a while during this season when there's shooting going on, or there's guys out here with bows and arrows, they're hunting. But you get one chance. And then if you just keep staying there, back in the old days, to be a buck hunter, one of your primary assets that you had to have was the ability to be very patient. You put a stand site trail, a big trail, sooner or later, whether there was any reason for it or not, sooner or later a buck would come along and you get a buck. All you had to do is be patient. Today, too much patience isn't good at all. That's not going to work for taking older bucks. Too much patience. You know how patient us Nordbergs are after all these years, and we keep, we tested this over and over and over again. We're only patient for about 3 to 5 hours. Then, if we don't see a buck where we thought we were going to be, everything was all set, boy, we should see a buck here, we move. Because if you sit in one tree or on the ground level blind, like we do a lot of, because those are easy stand sites to find and use. Not all kinds of work, and you can use them silently during the hunting season. So we use a lot of them with stools we strap in the back, we sit on a stool, natural cover. But even there, once he finds you there, that's the end of that spot for taking that buck. And to sit there. And we found that, sometimes they really didn't find you then. And so you just wasted that spot by moving to another stand site. But we found that the more you sit in one place, the more often you go to the same stand site, the fewer and fewer big bucks you see. Pretty soon you don't see any. And what a terrible thing. If you're a buck hunter, we found that if we move every half day, those bucks, no matter how many times they find us without us knowing about it, or sometimes we know it, we say, we just got a glimpse of him over there. Oh, geez, he found us. He's downwind, and he's sneaking away. But when we move every half day, we feel like we're not wasting a day at a site that a buck is avoiding. No, I hate that. So we move every half day. That's a lot of stand sites. And most of them, after the third day of the hunting season, most of the stand sites we use during the opening weekend and probably on Monday morning, the third day of the morning, are tree stand sites. But after that, boy, we're ground level stand hunters. And we move every half day, every time, without fail. And that really increased the number of, not only bucks, mature bucks deer we were seeing, but geez, all kinds of deer. I mean, it's a lot more fun in the woods, even when you don't see a buck, when you see all these other deer. And some passing right close to you, watch them feeding, doing it some way. It makes the season much more interesting when you're seeing other deer a lot. So, and we don't mind seeing those does around us unalarmed. You're not a bit alarmed. And they're feeding and the fawns with them and now, because they're the greatest buck lures in the woods. They, I mentioned it last time, when the does in heat, a buck can smell the pheromone she's releasing into the air by her urine a mile away. But one of the things that is different about when a doe is releasing pheromone into the air and a hunter is using pheromone, urine from a doe in heat at a stand site is that at the stand site they smell doe pheromone being released to the air, but they don't smell the doe. When the doe is there, they smell the doe, a real live doe, and they have plenty more. Next time you have a doe hung up in camp, you sniff the thing. There's lots of smell coming from the fur of a doe. They smell that, that's a doe, and that doe is in heat. But when it just comes from a bottle, they don't smell the doe. They just smell the pheromone. And the other thing they do smell, when the hunter is using it, they smell the hunter. So, a lot of difference. And back in the old days, it didn't matter if they smelled the hunter, they came anyway. But it's not that way anymore. Well, you know, yearling bucks will come to them anyway, but not the older bucks. So keep that in mind. Anyway, you get these 4 areas of expertise, you know. You need them all to be regularly successful at hunting older bucks. And so one of them is knowing your hunting area really well. And that's why scouting is so important. And then knowing the characteristic of a stand site. Boy, here, look at all this here that is mature buck effective. When you're scouting and you find spots like that all over the woods, that sometime or another, you got all these spots you can go back to during the hunting season and use. And especially if during the season you find very fresh tracks of a big buck going toward those spots, like at the edge of this feeding area over here, or at bedding area here, a doe bedding area over there, places like that. In this case, it was a watering spot. We don't get many at watering spots, but I've taken some there, so that can count. But you see, you can't stay home and depend on an old stand. That's just so bad when you want to hunt big bucks. You just can't stay home and depend on buck lures. Now you know why. And you can't stay home and depend on a trail cam to tell you, this is the place to get this big buck. And now you know why too. That just doesn't always work that way. And you got to find a bunch of stand sites because you can't just sit in one spot a whole hunting season and expect to take older bucks every year. It just isn't going to work. So, you know, my buddies and I have been taking almost one per hunter every year. You know, the 4 of us. And so if you'd like that kind of hunting, pay attention to this and start changing the ways you're hunting. And don't wait forever to do that. You know, eventually you're going to get around to saying, you know, I think I got to try what Dr. Nordberg's been talking about. And when you do, you're going to kick yourself someday and say, oh, I wish I would have started this a long time ago. You will. It's true. I know. So be sure, you know, subscribe. You know, I wish you would do that. The more you subscribe, the better. And hit that thumbs up button. That too. The more of you that do that, the better, because that is what determines on whether or not I will continue to be able to keep giving you seminars. They've been good. They've been very popular. I'm up to 1,033,000 now, coming up on 34,000. So I expect by the beginning of next year we'll be around 2 million, should be there. So thanks, Ken, and get your book. Well, with that, I'm going to say goodbye for now, and thank you for watching, and good luck now, you bow hunters. That's coming up pretty soon. Good luck to all of you this year. And if you'd like to take big bucks, now you know a lot about how to do it. So we'll see you again. Bye now. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account,
my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.